Hi, I'm Court Jackson.
I'm Sam Erickson.
And I'm Daniel Spencer. And today we will be analyzing 3 pieces of art by the great Impressionist painter, Claude Monet.
Claude Monet was a French painter during the late 19th, early 20th century and an influential fervent practitioner of the Impressionist style. As in described culture and values, the word Impressionism suggests a lack of realism, a description which aptly describes the movement of that time.
Impressionism was a radical movement in the late 19th century. Realistic portrayals of a painting's subject matter were the standard of the day, and the title Impressionism was actually coined as a hostile term intended to detract from the artist's radical works.
As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have come to accept a previously hostile term, or the term Mormons, as a term of endearment. Similarly, the Impressionists embraced the newfound title and rejected the constraints of the academic style and the Paris salon. The Impressionists promoted painting in quick bouts outdoors and oftentimes focused their works on subjects found throughout nature.
Impressionists also sought to understand how light and atmosphere affected our perceptions of the everyday world. Through their artistic studies, the effects of light, shadows, and color were tested as the artists explored this new style. As a result, many artists have produced fantastic Impressionist pieces for our enjoyment. The 3 pieces of art by Claude Monet that we will be analyzing today are Impression Sunrise, Boulevard des Capucines, and the Water Lily Pond. Interestingly enough, the first piece we will analyze, Impression Sunrise, is said to have inspired the term Impressionism.
In Claude Monet's painting, Impression Sunrise, Monet takes the filth of the world and creates a work of art that is beautiful. The scene for the sunrise piece was taken from the port of Le Havre in France, depicting Monet's view from his hotel window. The depiction shows a thick mist or fog that is over the scene, making it difficult to see the ships in the harbor. Looking in the horizon of the painting, we see the sun rising in the distance and is almost orange, suggesting the changes in color due to the fog. Many viewers of this painting were critical and at first disenfranchised by his work. They felt that it seems almost lazy and that compared to his other Impressionist pieces, that this was not at all an impression of the port of Le Havre. However, when you look more in depth into the painting, we find that it is indeed an accurate depiction and representation of the original impression that Claude Monet was experiencing outside of his hotel room window. In the background of the piece, we see the silhouettes of smokestacks emitting pollution into the atmosphere and what looks like it trailing down into the front of the scene being depicted. The pollution of the time period, combined with the morning ocean fog, created a thick layer of filth that made it difficult to see anything clearly. This makes sense when we look at the discoloration of the sun and the darkness of the vision on the harbor. In fact, Claude Monet himself said, when commenting on his piece of work, that it really can't pass as a view of Le Havre. Instead, what Claude Monet created was his impressions of what he had seen when looking upon the port. Monet's goal was not to create an accurate landscape, but to create his impressions of the landscape he was seeing. With this in mind, a viewer can begin to see the classic Monet characteristics. When we look into the horizon line, we see that yet again, the horizon seems to have disappeared into the background, having no clear distinction of when it stops. When we analyze the other attributes of the painting, we see that the water, sky, and reflections seem to have all merged together without a clear difference in each element. But the buildings and ship in the harbor have also been portrayed as almost indistinguishable blurs of color, making it difficult to pick them out. All of this style was chosen so that the sun would stand out above all the rest, thus helping us see the true beauty shining through the filth that the world had put before it, and in the process, accomplishing Claude Monet's goal of accurately depicting his impression as he looked upon the port of Le Havre.
Monet's Boulevard des Capucines provides us with an incredible snapshot of Parisian life in the late 19th century. Unlike many of his other works, however, Boulevard des Capucines focuses on the busyness of the city rather than scenes found within nature. These elements can be examined even further. The colors employed to depict Boulevard des Capucines demonstrate the bleak reality of existence within the city, as opposed to life experienced in nature. The grays and blues, combined with the overcrowded city, create a beautiful, picturesque, and detestable scene. Boulevard des Capucines was painted looking out of the apartment window of Monet's friend, the French photographer Nadar. Nadar's apartment was the location of the very first Impressionist exhibition. In my opinion, there could not have been a better place to unveil Impressionism and this particular piece of art. Notably, the exhibition took place in Paris, the location of the appropriately named Paris Salon, which organization had formerly been the gatekeeper to the prominent artistic world. Boulevard des Capucines had previously been rejected by the Paris Salon, so it only seems fit that the viewer of the art could gaze out upon the city which had rejected it. Boulevard des Capucines provides an overhead view of a crowded Paris street engulfed in the blanket of winter. The painting almost feels monochromatic, except for a few erratic splashes of color. The bleak color scheme and the accompanying deadness of winter create an atmosphere that is cold and unfeeling. Monet has undoubtedly captured the essence of winter with the muted blue and brown tones, the bright sunlight shining down offering the residents some respite from the elements. Monet also uses Japanese atmospheric perspective to blur the trees, the people, and the buildings in the background. The use of atmospheric perspective and the blurriness of the masses give us the impression that we are observing a fleeting moment in time. Although winter has made the city bleak and cold, the blurry figures are more lively, thriving with energy and life. The masses' livelihood is further established as sporadic flecks of red and peach are interspersed throughout their attire. Despite the seeming harshness of the subject matter, the painting is a beautiful depiction of life in the city. However, just as quickly as we come to see the life in the masses, we once again realize that they are completely indistinguishable, as impersonal and cold as the modern life that Monet has depicted. The one ray of hope that is given is the sunlight that falls upon the boulevard, reminding the viewer of a better life found in nature.
In the painting Water Lily Pond, Pink Harmony, we see a depiction of a footbridge over a small pond of water lilies. Its banks are filled with rich brush and plant life that create a scene of beautiful greens, pinks, and whites. The pond in the painting was actually built by Monet himself, along with the help of 6 gardeners at his home in Giverny. Much of the plant life was hand-picked by Monet because of how it looked. He placed a large emphasis on the lilies in particular, and even hired a gardener to tend to the plant life in the pond, so they were positioned and taken care of in such a way that they were conducive to how Monet liked to paint them. It is also important to highlight that the bridge is in fact a Japanese footbridge, and that the water lilies in the painting were imported from Japan. This shows how much of an influence Japanese landscape art had on the Impressionists, but more importantly, how much of an influence it had on Monet. It also shows how Monet slowly began cultivating the more naturalistic aspects of his paintings later on in his career. In a way, him cultivating the garden was an art form in and of itself. This particular art piece is a part of a small group of paintings that were dedicated to painting the footbridge from 12 different views, but each from the same vantage point. One aspect that Monet liked to emphasize, especially with this series of paintings, was the effects that lighting has on a scene. In this particular painting, we see the emphasis of yellow tones throughout. If we were to compare this to other paintings in the series, such as Water Lily Pond Green Harmony, we see the shading and depiction of light being concentrated in more green and blue tones, whereas in Japanese Footbridge over the Water Lily Pond in Giverny, we see the light being depicted as more white. This tonality made the paintings not only more interesting for Monet, but also made them more iconic. This then brings us to colour. Monet's en-plein air approach to painting was what made him an icon in the Impressionist and art world as a whole. Monet's masterful use of colour showed the powerful form that Impressionist painting could take when applied to landscape scenery. His use of colour is often associated with the calming emotions that many of his paintings evoke. When we pair this with his iconic quick-handed brushstrokes, or taches as they are referred to, it creates the more abstract imagery that many of us have come to love about Monet's paintings. Overall, Water Lily Pond Pink Harmony's formation as a whole shows Monet's inspired need to change the world of landscape art. From cultivating the plants to paleting the paint onto the canvas, Monet made sure that every painting was well thought out and respected through the entire process. That is why Claude Monet is known as the leader of the Impressionist movement and a legend in the art world.
Thank you for listening to our analysis of Impression Sunrise, Boulevard de Capucines, and the Water Lily Pond by Claude Monet.